You got the theme, guys. We just don't have a good simple statement because they were all throwing ideas at each other.
Right,
She's
right.
like, we got to narrow this down to a simple statement.
And that's the grappling. That's the consensus building.
And that
so
little bit of arguing.
And so what I want them to do is so this is what I preach in my class: higher order thinking. And so it's like we rarely do what questions in my class. We're always with the why in the house, right? And they understand that that's higher order thinking. So the grappling piece, it just makes them get the information more. It makes them more. The information is more ingrained because they've now internalized that information. They've argued that information. They've challenged the information, and so it's in them, you know. So it's so much better when they're grappling.
Yeah, and when she says this, and when they're doing that and they're having that conversation, one of the scholars chimes in and says, "Well, here's the text clue." So you just modeled, I need the background information, and then you said to them in your model, and then you're going to link this to a text clue, and then you said, and one of my favorite parts of your model, which I thought was so powerful, you said, if you don't do this, you're just guessing. I think that we've allowed them to guess. In many locations, in many settings, scholars are allowed to guess, but in your classroom that's unacceptable. You're teaching the thinking versus the answering. And so that process that they used to arrive, that thinking that they used to arrive is deep. And you said rich earlier, and you're right. But I want to challenge you on one thing you just said, because you said, this is what I preach in my class. You're not just preaching it, you're modeling it. You clearly modeled how you wanted them to think. And that step in the bubble, open my brain up and thinking model, it has been hard in our building. We've worked a lot on that. So I'm going to keep putting people in your room to let them watch that thinking model, because it's really important. And you got it back from the kids over and over again. You pushed them to think deeper. You said, you're shortchanging this poem. You weren't getting the thinking from them that you wanted. So you said, you're shortchanging this poem. It wasn't okay to answer just a little bit. And we talked about that in pre-conference. I know that I'm going to see that in your classroom, that you're going to require that complete, full, deep answer that will show evidence of the thinking. It's through the whole script. The evidence of the thinking is all over. So I think when we look and we sort this work, you will probably see your model coming through in their responses, because you provide for them a framework for answering that they were able to infer was what you actually wanted. Do you think that the scholars who don't have the ability to infer that that's what you wanted from your model are as likely to give you that response as the others? Do you know where I'm going with that? So if I didn't catch that in your model, that's what I wanted on the sheet, would I have known that somehow? Was there some way that I would have known that that was your criteria for this response? Do you think they knew what your criteria was for the response?
No.
Okay. And just now I noticed that you were looking at a great response. It made me smile because you were figuring out what your criteria was by looking at an example of good student work.
Right.
Which is something we do all the time in cluster.
I'm gonna tell you, I probably, to make this better, I should have given them a rubric for the response that I want. That's what it is.
So maybe next time?
A rubric.
Okay.
For the response.
And
then I could do it because what I'm going to do is,
Go ahead.
because we're not done with this, so the idea is that they're going to continue we're going to continue the challenge on Monday, and so that they can have we're going to have a packet of these stapled together where they interpret these poems. And so
and they will have had a lot of practice.
And they would have had practice with the statement, so that I can get it.
So, but I watched you do it.
But I'm gonna give it to them on Monday. I'm gonna give it to them with a rubric, and I bet you the answers are gonna come out a lot better.
I'll be curious.
I'm a fan of the rubric.
I know you are, but I think too that that's how you're used to defining your criteria, because we've done it so many times where we bring the student work and we divide it up and we say, all right, well, what was the criteria for good in this? So it's what you're used to doing. If you, okay, I want to go back
You know why I didn't do, all right, because I assumed, all right, because one, we have a rule of always including text evidence in your responses. That I didn't explicitly say, but I should just be in the habit of explicitly.
Well, there's a lot of procedural expectation in your class that you don't need to state each time because, as you said in the pre-conference, you've worked for months to establish certain procedures and expectations, and so I understand that sometimes you don't need to state every single
because I'm
one of your
gonna tell you, there's only a few of these. Like so far, I've only come across one that has not given me the text evidence.
And I'll be curious too to see what they look like when they don't have the support of their peers and they're writing it all on their own. That'll give you a whole nother level of assessment that you'll be able to reference.
Which is what some of them got to that. So some of them. So what they had to do the first, they had to come to me as a group with their group one, and then they had to go out and pick one and do one on their own. And so I do have some individual ones.
Yeah.
That, but all of them I have individuals. Next week it'll be all. When they do it on Monday, it'll be the rest of them will be all individual. It'll be well, you know how I do the silent. I do the silent gallery thing where they walk around and have to be silent. So Monday's piece will be.
They're note takers.
It'll be a silent. Well, they'll have the graphic order. It'll be silent. It'll be a silent. So there will be no.
Okay, so that's going to be
no
a much
sharing.
more independent assessment.
There will be
Gotcha.
no sharing.
In the beginning, when you have the kids, they're developing their own essential question. I can't imagine how long that took to develop. Because I've taught teachers to write essential questions and it's not easy. So when you do that, when you taught the scholars to develop their own essential questions and they took that ownership from you, why did you decide that that would be a powerful thing to do?
All right, so one is about the rubric, right? So usually, we give them the essential question. I see this all the time, teachers write questions. But the whole idea is to get to be student-centered and to be student-driven and let students lead. And so if you're going to explicitly state the learning objective for the day, what better way to get the students to internalize it by making them develop a question from the learning objective? And so we teach that as a reading strategy where we're reading statements and we're asking questions from the materials. And so when we do PDPs, I do this strategy called pre, during, and post. And so the part of the pre is where they take the text features or they take a title or and they develop questions from that as a pre-reading strategy. So they've had so much practice at developing questions from material, so that they can ponder. That's another one of my words, ponder. I have them pondering a lot, right? So. So that's how. So they're used to writing questions all the time. I make them question everything, So
What I think is so powerful about that is they're deeply engaged in whatever that objective's going to be that day within seconds.
In seconds, as soon as they come in the room, they're locked in. Okay, learning objective, and they're sitting there. Okay, I gotta get my question. All right, what is this? What is this learning objective even saying?
Right. No time squandered, because you can be messing with Power School, which I noticed didn't work when you were trying to.
Yeah, so I had to,
so you can be fiddling with whatever you need to fiddle, and they're already deeply engaged.
And then I can just casually walk around, and they're moving. It works out.
Super fast engagement. So here's a thought. You've trained these scholars to the point where they are independently creating their own essential questions for today's learning objective, and they're written in a way that it really shows that they understand what it is you're challenging them to do. Can you leverage the thinking that you've taught them? So you've taught them to think deeply, you've taught them to understand and be able to analyze learning objectives to write essential questions. Can you leverage all of that thinking and make them do the heavy lifting for you on defining this criteria? Because this is something that you're an organic teacher, and a lot of times you're like, let's do this, let's do that.
Good idea. That's a good activity.
What if you say, hey guys, so all right, what would the criteria be for this graphic organization?
You know what?
What would that look like?
And I was going to do another activity, and it's in my lesson plan, but I switched it. I don't know if you caught that, but I switched it. I was going to have them take a good inference statement that was developed by one of my 7th graders. And I was going to make them break it down into the BK, TC, and trace the steps by looking into the statement.
Okay, yeah.
All right, and so I think I'm still going to do that,
Okay.
but I'm going to make them come up with a scoring system on Monday with that statement. I think that would like really, I think I want to do that as my like mini lesson before I let them break off into, that's how I teach them the rubric is. Yeah, that's what I do. That's awesome,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. It's going to be exciting to watch.
That is-
You've already gotten to the point where you're facilitating. I mean, they're really working for you. The culture in your classroom's impeccable. And I enjoyed being there so much. I literally, and I'll show you where I wrote it in script, I literally had goosebumps on my arm.
I looked over at one point and I saw you doing like this.
I literally
yeah.
did. And that,
They do that to me all the time, man. They do it to just their passion for learning is.
Where did they get that?
I don't want to take it.
Really? Okay.
I'll take a little credit.
Okay.